for the moderators. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you here live and in person. And I understand there's about 10 of you out there in the Zoomosphere. So welcome as well. I'm Nancy McGehee. I am co-editor of the Journal of Travel Research. You see, giving me rabbit ears, along with my co-editor.
I'm Jim. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi, everyone.
Jim Petrick, who hails from Texas A&M
University.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Sarah, I see I've learned things. I've learned things already as co-editor. I've learned to say howdy, that's a howdy, Kelly. Come on in. Everybody, have a seat. Oh, well, that's what we should have done, I guess, maybe. But anyway, again, it's wonderful to see everyone, both live and virtually. We've got hopefully an interesting hour or so for you. It is certainly an honor for Jim and I to have been chosen to take over this role as co-editors of JTR. We already have no idea how Jeff Crouch did this on his own, or how Rick Perdue or Chuck Goldner ever did it on their own, because of course, maybe we do. They're twice the brain of us, so that makes sense. But we're really thrilled to have this opportunity. It's already been a lot of fun, and we're learning a great deal. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Jim, say a few words of introduction.
Howdy. For today's presentation, we're talking about our lens of the journal, which is one journal. And we're going to talk about what we look at when we look at research. And there are well over 100 journals. There are so many outlets for our research. And so this is, again, just one lens, gives you a vision of how we're running the journal a little bit and what we're looking for. A lot of what we say will carry over to most journals. Some of it doesn't at all for other journals. So take that with a grain of salt. We're going to spend plenty of time with Q&A at the very back end. So we look forward to your questions. So we're going to run through our slides as quickly as we can because you have a better idea of what you want to know than we do. So that's why we'll leave a time for Q&A. So ladies and gentlemen, the amazing Nancy McGehee.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to life on the edge here and go without the mask for a little bit, just for this next section of it. So yes, our approach is to have questions at the end, but I'm also very supportive, and we'll stop and ask during the questions. If you've got something burning that you feel like, if you have a similar short-term memory to me, that you really need to talk about that question right then, I am all in favor of that as well. So again, our aim is to be very interactive, and don't be shy. Okay, let's get started. Next slide, please.
Oh, here, I got you.
Oh,
you got right here.
Oh, power.
There's your power.
Look ahead.
Push that
to it. It's exciting. Yeah, see. Yeah,
that's on there.
There it is. All right, session overview. 4 items. We're going to keep it short and sweet with the focus on, again, particularly for those of you in the crowd who may be early career or PhD students and wanting to know what's the secret sauce, which I hate to be a downer for you, but there isn't a secret sauce. We've got a lot of advice and thoughts between the two of us of the accumulated 150 years of publication, but really it's going to be just some practical tips as far as your research voyage. So it starts with the plan. Research agendas and questions. We're going to talk about that, about the kinds of items that you want to be thinking about. Then cast your net wide. The journal selection process. That's always a little daunting. As Jim just mentioned, there's over 100 journals out there. So how do you figure out which one's the right one for you? Next, the focus, we'll hone it in. We'll come down the funnel a bit and focus on JTR, our vision, our aims, and a little bit about what Jim and I have been talking about over the last year in terms of some things that we want to do to add to an already amazing journal. And then finally, preparing for success, the manuscript creation process. So when you get down to the nuts and bolts, what's some advice that we might have in terms of the creation of manuscripts? Your turn, boss.
Here, I'll take that because I think I got weird points in here.
Power, yeah.
For those that have seen me present before, I apologize. I don't stand still well, and I've got to be in front of this camera, so I'll be a little fidgety. I'm sorry. When we talk about starting research from a quantitative standpoint, Nancy and I are firm believers of the role that theory takes. And I don't think we're evolving the journal in any manner related to how Jeff ran it and it's been run historically. But when you submit to JTR, we expect theory to play a role. And good quantitative research starts with theory. You study the literature, and as for the young scholars out there, we expect you to try to solve the big problems of the world. And when we look at manuscripts, Nancy and I have looked at, both of us, over 600 manuscripts, probably since last July. That's about right, somewhere right in that vicinity. And we see a lot of young scholars really trying to tell us what they've done has never been done before. And they spend so much time with that. And it's not overly relevant that what you've done hasn't been done before. What's important is that you're solving an important problem with what you're doing. So obviously, we hope you're looking for research gaps, but we start with the problem. So we hope you're looking for world problems to solve. We've got major global problems out there. Economies are suffering. We have sustainability issues. We've got health issues. We've got divorce. We've got all of these things that are going on that you could help solve these problems. So look for the problems that you want first. That's how I prefer the people who work with me to start. And we think about what a problem is. And then we want you to study as many theories as you can. Nancy has an amazing document that I can't talk much about, but it's going to be unveiled and it's going to be huge news for the field at some point. We're trying to put together all of the theories that we can. We want them to be accessible. And we want to make them accessible to everybody in short note version. Young scholars have trouble looking for theory, and it's not always easy to find. Too often young scholars think that theory means somebody studied this before, so now it's a theory. Theory is much more established than that. So we want you to start learning what problems are, start learning what theories are, and that's where good research starts. So if you do those two things, you've had a great start to your study. And that leads to a great problem statement because we know what the problem is. And then we talk about how we're going to solve that problem or understand it based on the theory. So we're looking for real problems, things that make a difference. And as you understand these theories, the amazing part that you get to see in some young scholars, and I'll pick on Joelle. Joelle is here, and she had the misfortune of studying with me first, and then the fortune of studying with Nancy afterwards. And we see young scholars evolve, and you see them start, and they start with one theory, and then theories lead to other theories, and you start to see these major connections in the world. That's why you need to know as many theories as you can to see where those connections are. Once you find all of them and you understand all of them that you are related to your problem, choose the best theory. I read a manuscript yesterday that had 8 theories listed in it. And they were trying to piece together these 8 theories to put together one manuscript. It would have been so much stronger with one solid theory. Sometimes studies have 2 or 3 theories that fit, but don't force theories to fit your problem. We study theory to understand how to best explain what we're doing. Okay, so this is what the process should typically look like for quantitative research. This is from our journal's perspective what we want. And I stole this from press books. So we start with a theory and we hypothesize based off of that. So that's your general level of focus. And what we're always looking for is that clear problem statement right at the beginning. And a good problem statement gives you a lot of brownie points for the reader. The reader says, this is what they're going to solve. When you get down to methods and you're wondering what they're going to answer, the reader's worn out by then. So we want to see the problem right away and how you're going to solve it. Then we analyze the data. Once we know what the clear problem is and know how the best way to solve it is, then you collect your data. A lot of studies do this exactly the opposite. They collect data, they analyze the data. Oh crap, we have to submit this to a journal somewhere, and I better find a theory for it. Okay, and we can see those studies, and those don't typically make it through a desk review unless the theory magically matches up amazingly on the back end. And then we talk about how we've evolved theory on the back end. So theory set things up. We did some cool study, And then how did we evolve that understanding? So if it followed theory and it fit, it strengthened that theory, it made it better. You can talk about how your population might be different than other populations. That strengthens our understanding. And if it was different than theory, try to help us explain why. So maybe your sample was different, maybe times are changing, maybe COVID changed it, something occurred that had that happen, okay? And now to talk about the other side of research.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about the quantitative aspects. Now let's talk about the qualitative, and then I've got a little surprise here at the end. Yeah, I know you're excited about that. So not unlike, in many ways, there's a lot of similarities. We're not talking about two mutually exclusive things when we're talking about a methodological approach. I always say that the most important thing is that your research question drives your methodological approach. We'll pick on Joelle again. Joelle and I are working on this little 3-part article or 3 articles together and talking about the different theoretical aspects, but we're also talking about the method. And we've had a lot of great discussion about, well, depending on the research question, that's going to dictate what kind of method we do. So I think that's very important to take into consideration. And so you find those things out when you critique the existing literature and you kind of develop your research question or problem. My argument, not everybody agrees with this, but my argument has always been that even with grounded research, particularly if you're early on in your career, you need to have a theoretical foundation. You need to have some sort of underpinning for what it is you're doing. I always say we didn't just spring from the womb doing research. We had life experiences. We've been exposed to things. We've worked in places. And so there has to be a perspective from which we come. And whether that's your sort of an ontological and epistemological statement or reflexivity, there has to be some foundation and some base there. That's siloed. We keep reading it and it looks like soiled. It's siloed. Don't feel siloed. And that's why I think this was the surprise at the end. There's such huge opportunity right now for mixed and multi methods. We're seeing some exciting manuscripts that are coming together because I'm a strong believer in a bricoleur approach that a problem needs to be looked at from a lot of different angles. And so for me, we can talk about quantitative and qualitative, but I think the most important thing is to lead with the research question, but also to think about what sort of mixed or multi-method approaches you might want to take. I believe that's you. Oh, and then borrowing from press books as well, the notion of gathering data, looking for patterns, and developing theory from that when you're talking about qualitative research. Questions about that before we jump ahead? We've done the sort of quantitative, qualitative things. Questions? I know there's varying degrees of jet lag we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize what Nancy said. We've got a proliferation right now of mixed methods manuscripts coming in. And if you're a young scholar in particular, don't be bashful, find a way to mix them. And we're seeing articles use the qualitative portion at the beginning, but also at the end. They found results, but they couldn't explain them. So they went out and got more interviews. Solid, are you ready?
Yeah, let's
ready?
take it.
Awesome. I don't even know what's next. Oh, but cast your net wide.
Did anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry.
Something did come up on the Zoom.
Jack?
Now, most top journals like JTR are looking for extending theories. In your opinion, what counts for extending a theory?
I'll take a shot first. Okay. Typically, we start with a really good theory. I can't tell you how many manuscripts, it's over a dozen, that took the theory of planned behavior because of COVID and added risk to it. Okay, great concept. Somebody did it first. Extended theories typically extended in a brand new way. And we're not looking at adding 2, 3, 4, 5 variables. We're looking at typically adding a variable or a different population or a different way of looking at things. So that's what I look for. Nancy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love it. I love this is why I really like this partnership because Jim can really operationalize it, whereas I'm kind of maybe stepping back a little and thinking, well, you said extending theory. okay, we can extend theory, but we can also critique theory. We can also contribute back to the larger theory in a different way that's maybe not necessarily extending. It might be a little bit more sophisticated is not the right word, but a little more complex maybe than that, because there may be different aspects that we're able to strengthen. And to say, yes, this piece of this theory has been further strengthened by what we've done. And then there are other parts that we might say didn't really hold up. Or what we did discover is we need to do more work to work with this theory in this way that we discovered. So there's different ways of discovery beyond even extending.
Awesome. Any questions from that? Yeah.
What about blending theory between the quant-qual kind of divide there? If there, you come across theory, you ground it, or you start with it in a qualitative sense, and you're trying to reconcile it in a quantitative sense, and you have this divide. What are some kind of ideas for moving forward past that?
Can we go ahead, Nancy?
Yeah. Yes, we can come back in here. So I mean, I think you're talking about this intersection between theory and method, which is the best, most fun space there is. And I think, like Jim alluded to earlier, it was like a sequential approach or sometimes it's a nested approach, right? You do something qualitative, and then from that you develop something quantitative, and then again you'll go back to the qualitative aspects. So I think when you're talking about the theoretical part, again, you've got to be informed by the research question. And so we're certainly open to those sorts of aspects.
Yeah, and I took that last question, the extended, which is because so many people are sending in extended versions of this theory and they're adding a variable. But Nancy's right, evolving theory is a better word, because all of our research should change it and better understand it. And that's why theory is such an important thing to ground what we do. Because it gives us this backbone to go back to, especially on the back end of a manuscript. If you just say, here's the results, we can say, well, this is from your sample from this one time. That's what you found. That's awesome. But if it's got that backbone with it, it's got so much more strength. So we're going to go talk about your journal selection. And we want you to realize, JTR is a very particular journal. We're going to talk about impact factor and how many manuscripts we look at very soon, but we can only accept approximately 10 articles a month. That's the reality. And, when we have these other journals out there, when we see something that doesn't fit with us, it doesn't mean it's a bad article. It just means it didn't find the right home. So we want you to know the history. We talked about earlier about understanding what's going on out there, know what you've done in the past, and see the future. We talk about starting with good problems. The world is changing every day. I'm an eternal optimist, so I see all of this being amazing in the future. Most people don't live through the lens that I live. It's a scary world out there. How are we going to solve these problems? And tourism research should be doing it. This is not done by hard scientists only. It's done by soft scientists. It's done by from hospitality angles, from sport angles, from recreation angles. All of us that do research can help solve these world problems. So think about what those problems are. See what the future is going to be, and think about your research plan that does that.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
You're off to the
Yeah,
next
go ahead.
one. One of the ways that I look at it too is, as Jim alluded to, JTR, Annals Tourism Management, they're kind of the grandparents, right? They're the ones that have been around for a long time. So you have to know your history of that journal, right? You have to be able to dig deep. And I always say, for fun and chuckles, go look at the very first issue of JTR, the very first issue of Annals, any of those journals, and where we started from, and then hit them about every decade to see what kinds of topics were, what was hot, what was not, what evolved, the methodology that evolved. And it really helps you understand the history of that journal. And as far as see the future, I tell a little story on myself. There are a lot of wonderful journals that are coming out that we see on TriNet, right? New ones. And sometimes being the old curmudgeon that I am, I roll my, oh, not another new journal. You've got to be kidding me. But I shouldn't do that because there are some great ones out there that are just getting started. And I tell the story of back in ancient times known as the 1990s. Kelly knows those times. She's familiar with that era. You were a child, a babe in the woods. The 90s, you probably watched movies from there. I was a young researcher, and there was this new upstart journal called the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. You may have heard of it. And I thought, I'm probably going to be studying things related to sustainability for most of my career. This might be a good kind of new journal to check out. Now, that was a gamble that certainly paid off because through the years, obviously that journal has grown and been just amazing. But each of you may have that Journal of Sustainable Tourism in your field of research, and you're looking ahead, and there might be a journal that just came out in the last year or two, but it really follows what your research area is. So it might be worth it to take a gamble and to bet on it for the future as well.
I'll tell a quick story. I don't know how much time we got. I have no idea. I never do. John Crompton has the most cited article in our field. It's his motivations article from the early 70s. And I got to interview John for an award he was winning. We talked about that article. And he said it was plain common sense. You know, everyone on the planet could have written that article. It was asking people what their motives were, and he came up with ones that they said the most often. But nobody had done it before that. So when you go back and look at the history of journals, the most cited article seems like the most obvious thing to have been done, but at that time it wasn't. So whatever you're studying, you know, if you're looking towards the future and you're seeing what things are, it might seem obvious to you, but if it hasn't been done yet and it's solving an important problem, it's probably important research. Okay. And I didn't know what that said. So these are Nancy and I have combined slides because we've been doing separate dog and pony shows across the world and the planet. And our slides get combined. And so this is her slide. So I wondered what she meant. So now I know. Thank you. Explore alternative research distribution channels. You know, your research needs to be read. You know, the sad part is we worked so hard to write a dissertation for those of you that have done it. And, you know, I'm assuming your mom and or your dad might have read it. You know, if you had a significant other, they might have read it or lied to you and said they read it. Most people don't read it. You know, so you've got to get that research in the hands of people. And, you know, a lot of people are really good at this. And follow them, learn from other people, learn how they get their research out there. One of my former graduate students, Matthew Stone, I think he's got 5 to 10 research publications that are in journals. He is cited and read 1,000 times more than me, more than 1,000. He's in USA Today, Time Magazine, People Magazine. People read those. And when you think about getting your research out, think about solving these problems and who needs to see that information. So as Nancy's slide says, cast that net wide. Think about alternative options that you might have. You know, posting your main findings on social media might get somebody interested in studying that area as well.
Let me hit that middle button real quick. The strategic overlap between your current program and your target program, Venn diagram. Current program, what's the strategic plan? What does if you're in a PhD program, what are their articles that they think are really important, or journals that they think are really important? Dream program or programs, where do you want to go? What journals do they think are most important? Then what's the overlap there, right? So that's one of the things to look at even when you're early on in your career. I'd also say that related to that, it's really important to think about keywords and what keywords you think your research is going to consist of, and what keywords you see in some of these journals, and finding that overlap will help as well.
Oh, and titles. Learn to write a title, and don't say the re-examination of or the determination of, and say all of the variables in your model. You know, one of the things that Nancy and I have to do is we've got to take articles and put them into an issue. And a lot of the titles are just too boring to put at the front of an issue. You know, there's an old thought that the first article is the best article. From our standpoint, we're looking for the one with the most intriguing title. You know, be unique out there, be, you know, something different than other people have been. Annals did something really cool about 15 years ago. They said how few words you could use. And that evolved how their titles work. And we don't have a vision for that, but that might be something we talk about. And we're going to have an editorial board meeting while we're here. And one of the things we want to make sure our editorial board does is they tell authors, make that a better title if it doesn't sound so. Also back to the journals that you choose. For those that are young scholars, talk to your promotion and tenure committee. Make sure you know what articles they want you to publish in and what counts towards tenure for you. Once you have tenure or full professor, whatever your goal is, then you've got the whole gamut to go after. Once you're done, and Nancy and I are old, we're like a million years combined. We don't really have to worry about where we publish. We have to worry about where our graduate students publish, though. We want to make sure they get published in the journals that are best for them. So young scholars, make sure you're choosing those journals wisely and make sure it fits with what the promotion and tenure committee needs, and then think selfishly for yourself when you get a chance to. Okay, I think you're up.
Questions for that one before we jump on? Anything on the chat? I'm just excited. There's more than 3 of you in here. I never would have guessed. Monday afternoon, everybody's arriving on time. Okay, is JTR the right match for you? Visions and aims, priorities and realities. So the first 9 or so items, you can just go down to the link there at the bottom that says sagepub.com. That's basically from our submission guidelines. That is okay. That is something that you can follow along and read more deeply when you go to the submission guidelines, which obviously we recommend that you take a look at those before you submit an article, because that's certainly a real easy way for us to desk reject, is if those guidelines aren't being met. But I think there's nothing terribly earth shattering there. We're following again in Jeff's lead in terms of the subject matter needs to be substantive. It needs to be a unique contribution to tourism in general, tourism management, tourism as a phenomenon. Leading edge, and leading edge may be something that Jim was talking about earlier, some area or field that's happening. This morning, I got an email. It's the Focus Wire Daily, and they were talking about, I think, SPACs, S-P-A-C. I have no idea what a SPAC is. I'm going to try to find out, but that's certainly something leading edge, because I don't know what it is. Well, maybe just because I don't know what it is, that doesn't necessarily mean, but
does anybody know what a SPAC is?
Yeah, anybody? SPAC? All right, yeah. It's Focus Wire, so it's an IT related thing with the hospitality industry, or it could be financial investment. I'm sure you can use the Google and find it. Yes. Well-established research, though, is also welcome if it's innovative. It doesn't mean that you have to sit there and think, wow, I feel like, in my opinion, there's nothing new under the sun. How am I going to ever publish anything? Because it's all kind of been done. We believe that there's plenty of room. We don't discount any subject matter or any methodology out of hand. There's plenty of room for everything, so long as it makes a unique contribution. Same with methodology and theory. We've talked about that. I'm of the belief that almost everything we do is local research. Local could be national. Local could be a state, a town, a city, but by nature of the tourism product, even if we're talking to tourists, it's got a place. It's not something that's global. So the trick is to take that local research and to manage it in a way that has interest for a global audience. Make it something that makes me want to, and random agritourism. You do some research on agritourism, might be for a specific destination, but the approach or the theoretical foundation or the method might really fascinate me. I think, oh, I could apply that to my community or my set of communities. And so you have to carefully craft that manuscript in a way that you're articulating your relevance on a global scale. Advanced grammar and language, probably the #2 reason we desk reject. If we can't understand it when we read it, if we can't understand what fabulous idea you have, then we can't get past that editing to really determine whether it's a quality piece or not. And then we also don't want to burden our editorial board folks with something that they're spending all their time editing. How many editorial board members do we have in the house? Yeah, several. Thank you. I'm sure you're all in favor of that as well, right? Yes. So as I say, that's probably the number 2 reason why we've desk rejected, back up to the theoretical foundation and contribution for the number 1 reason right now that we are rejecting is when there is a lack of that theoretical framework. Recognizing the COVID impact, that's something that Jeff, very early on, maybe was the first journal to implement specifics about that during the submission guidelines. And I think it's the reality. It's what we're going to, we all have to deal with regardless of what we're studying. Is it possible that you research something that's not impacted by COVID? Maybe, but you've got to be able to make an argument for that with us to share with us so that we see, all right, this is why it's still relevant, even though it may not have impact or be impacted by. The good news that I think everybody's excited about, those last 3 items, but that first one is the fact that we are changing to APA format from fabulous Chicago style, which I know everyone's loved. Those of you that have been doing submitting to this journal for a long time have probably grumbled about Chicago style. So shout out to Bynum Boley for suggesting that, he and Kyle for suggesting that to us. And we approached the publishers, which I always thought it was a publisher thing, right? That maybe that was their font and style, but it is not. So we have already implemented that. If you're thinking about submitting, just submit it in APA format. And so those of you who are maybe already have something in the system, we will finish things through in Chicago style if you've already been accepted. And the next to the last, prioritizing globalization of the journal is something that when Jim and I first started talking about submitting a proposal to co-edit the journal, it was very important for us. I think that the previous editors have also found it to be important. And if you look through time, you can see how things like the editorial board, authors have diversified and expanded, but we want to take that to the next level. So we're working on that on a number of levels, particularly geographically global. We're underserved in Africa and Latin America, and we really want to find ways to improve that. And then finally, the realities of recognizing the level of competition. And Jim alluded to that earlier. We have pages and pages of really boring statistics, if you want to see them, that basically boil down to we're now getting about 100 manuscripts a month. So that's about 1,200 in a year. And there are 140 or so articles per year that get published. So you do the math through that. We're looking at about a 70% desk rejection rate and then an overall 10% acceptance rate at the end of the day. So it's challenging, but it's not impossible. And so that's one of the realities that we're trying to balance with trying to diversify what we're doing. Questions about that? Anything to add, Jim?
We'll take questions first before I add. Yeah.
So the advanced grammar language was the second top reason. What was the first? I think
Theoretical, lack of theoretical framework. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I'm going to add something, especially with the grammar part. So one of the things that Nancy and I are doing more to try to take pressure off the editorial board is we're doing something called unsubmit. So an article comes in, we review it. There's a lot there. We like the article. It's theoretically, conceptually strong. Grammar is a problem, or they're missing a problem statement. There's something that the authors can fix. We're unsubmitting a lot of papers. It means we get to read that paper twice before it possibly goes out for review, but it also means that if a really good paper comes in, the grammar is really weak, it's not going to go to the editorial board. Then they have a chance to edit it, send it back to us. And then when we read it that second time, if it looks good, it has a chance at least to go through. Sometimes the grammar is so bad, we'll unsubmit it and say, we can't comprehend what's going on. It might be a good article, but we can't tell. So again, those are the 2 main reasons. The theory is by far number 1. We get a lot of technical reports that were written for countries. I would have never guessed it. Some of them are like 5 pages long and they're written like a little technical report and they're submitted to us. We love those. Our inbox, some days we see as many as 12 new manuscripts a day. And we wake up and say, oh crap, that's a lot to read. And then we get,
Oh, really? That's.
Oh, we love to read 12 articles a day. Yes. But when you get one that's that bad, it makes our lives easier. You know, it's an easy desk reject and we can do that real quickly. Unfortunately, most of them aren't that. Those are the easy ones to get off of our desk though. Here's the realities of what goes on. You know, we are seeing right now more than 100 manuscripts submitted per month. Each month this year, we've had over 100. Nancy and I, as co-editors, we get to treat this more like a part-time job that's full-time. You know, we have our full-time jobs, and then we've got this other job that's JTR. And Nancy runs the journal from July 1st till the end of December. I run it from January 1st till the end of July. So we're in charge of desk review during that time. And we meet probably on average once a week. We text on average 27 times a day. And we're constantly talking about the journal. Right now it's a lot about baseball because both of our teams are going to be, no, you didn't make the World Series, sorry. Well, I get to talk to you next week about A&M being in the College World Series. Yep.
I just stole the World Series and my school lost, so now he's rubbing it in.
Yeah,
Get
I'm
it out of
sorry.
your system.
No, I wanted to play you. Didn't want to play Oklahoma. That's stupid. So we're seeing 100 manuscripts per month. On average, it's, you know, about 3.5 per day we look at. Every day we get up, we look what that number is. And Nancy, she's not in charge of desk reviewing, but, you know, she'll send me a text, holy crap, 12 manuscripts today, or looks like an easy day, only one in today, you know, and we keep up with it. And we're a wonderful yin and yang. So I am quantitatively stronger than qualitatively. Nancy's qualitatively stronger than quantitative. We both have done both types of research and we both feel we have strengths in it, but I'll have a manuscript come in that's qualitative and I can't tell if it's quality or not. So send it over to Nancy. Nancy will do the desk review and that helps tremendously. It allows us to be as smart as a Jeff combined. You know, and Jeff was so strong on both sides of the coin, and together we're able to look at all of these manuscripts in some sort of lens that we feel we're able to look at it fairly. We receive a couple letters to the editor per month, a letter to the editor. Typically, we want it to be related to something that's been submitted to before. We want it to be timely. We want it to be something that's shorter, that's almost in response to something. That's what we're looking for those. Our foundational articles, and I don't like the word conceptual. I think we got to find a way just to call them foundational because we want all articles to be conceptual in some manner. Foundational articles, we're looking for the leaders in the field. We're asking you to submit to us a proposal. And that proposal is, this is my area of research. I'm the dude, I'm the dudette. I'm the person in this area of study. And I want to write a piece that's going to be transformative. It's going to enlighten and illuminate this area of research and give the readers one place to look for it. Those are powerful and we don't take those lightly. This month we had 6 submissions, of which one of them went through the process correctly. Now, doesn't mean they were all not worthy of us looking at, but we want to start with, you know, I'm the person feeling you've got to defend that. So you've got to write a proposal and say why you are capable of writing this and should be. Even if it's a letter to the editor, an empirical article, or a foundational article, it goes through full review. It gets desk reviewed. As Nancy said, we're at about a 70% desk review rate, which is a reject. So out of the 100, 30 go out for review. It works out really well because our editorial panel is about 160 people, okay? With 160 people, with 30 out for review, that means we need 90 reviewers per month. At 90 reviewers per month, some of our reviewers have to review almost every month. So I think I saw somebody that had 9 reviews in the last year. I think that's the most that I've seen. Have you seen more than that in a year? So 8's kind of what we're shooting for. Some people are 6 or even 5, but we want to make sure we don't burden our editorial panel. So we're desk rejecting a lot higher percentage than Jeff did before, and it's dual edged. The bigger edge is we're getting more submissions and it's not slowing down, not at all. Because we're getting more submissions and we're trying to grow our editorial board to be more globalized, but we can't put
Make
too
it
much of a
back.
burden on them. So that's where that 30% positive desk review number comes from. We look for 120 articles per year. That's kind of our magic number to fill the journal. And Nancy and I are going through some growing pains with it.
How does it
We're
work? You get
we're
back
learning
okay?
what that looks like for those 10 articles. And Nancy said it best. So for those that didn't know, I had health problems last July. Thank you.
Mhm.
Nancy took over the whole journal to start. So that's what we came up with, 6 months and 6 months. And she said, like 2 weeks in, she said, Jim, I'm
And he
drinking water
lives down
from a
there
fire hose."
somewhere.
And that's what the learning curve has been.
Was whiskey from it.
Whiskey, that sounds even better than water from a fire hose. And oh, I did some research on that for us tonight too. But our learning curve, you know, right now, I'm just feeling comfortable 6 months in of running it.
So you want to just keep going?
No, I'm going to hand it over to you on July 1st and then she'll take over. But it took us this long to figure it out. That 120 is kind of a magic number. We can possibly go a little bit higher, but we want to keep the quality extremely high as well. Our average submission since July 1st is 96. Every month since I've started, we've averaged about 110 to 120. So, you know, we're just escalating every month. It's getting more. Time from completion to online first, we're really proud of. It's about 32 days. It's 1 month. So once we get your article accepted, we can get it in print really fast. We need your copyright form from you. We need to get that done. Sage does an amazing job with their online system, getting into a batch, getting it published really, really quickly. So that turnover happens really quick. We're also really proud of our editorial board. If you work on as an associate editor for a journal, you know the pains that it is to get reviewers. You know, one of the things that was fun when we took over editorship, we got to step down from associate editorship for other journals. And I think I've worked for 12 to 15 different journals in my career. As an associate editor, I know I averaged approximately 10 asks before I got 3 accepts. Nancy and I, at the end of the month, so those 30 articles that we think were the best for that month, we don't assign any reviewers until the first of that next month. So July 1st, I'll have my last 5 days of work. You know, I'll have the 30 articles ish that I'll look at. I'll look at the editorial board, see who hasn't published in the last month first, and I'll assign those reviewers first, and I'll choose the best article for each one. And we then fill that up. And then if we need additional reviewers to get to our magic number of 3, we look for people that have reviewed recently. And I'm looking at you, Brent. I did that to you last month, so I apologize for that. So that's the process. Anything to add, Nancy?
No.
Any questions?
Next item. All right, so this is what we've all been waiting for, and cognizant of the time, we're 15 till. So as particularly for early career folks and PhD students, I think this is important. It's very important, and it seems like common sense, but starting with a good idea, and that sounds, oh yeah, sure. But sometimes for those of you, especially early on in your career, you realize that there's a challenge there. And I certainly argue that it's something that takes time. It needs to percolate. When I was in Texas, we used the example of a brisket. You know, a brisket takes time to roast. What would be up here? Oh, smoked salmon. It takes a long time to smoke really good salmon. You can't rush it to really get a quality product. You also need, as you search for your ideas, to find this balance of both reading, which as a grad student, of course, but particularly during that part of your career, you're reading a lot of work. And so looking at existing research, but also working with industry partners. I can't emphasize that enough. The requirement, our field is a field. It's just that. People are out every day doing the things that we study, and whether they're on the supply or demand side. So you have to be out in the field seeing and observing to know what's going on as you work on your ideas. GIGO, people used to say Geiger all the time, garbage in, garbage out. Again, must be something from even before the 90s. If you start out with bad data, all the lipstick and makeup in the world is not going to make it pretty, and it's not going to make it publishable. So you can flower it up and do wonderful things all around it. But if you do not have solid data to begin with, whether or informants or whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, or mixed, you're not going to have a sound article. So that's why it's important. And I know it's hard to take your time at the beginning to really work toward that research question and idea. But on the other hand, don't neglect the discussion and conclusions, right? And I think sometimes I liken it to a romance in a relationship. And when you first start dating somebody, it's just like your theory. You fall in love with your theory. Well, you fall in love with your research and you think this is the greatest research ever. Everybody's going to love it. And then about, 3/4 of the way through, you start seeing the imperfections, right? Just like in a romance. Oh, wow, does he eat loud? Or, oh my goodness, yeah, that's what you're wearing? Starts to happen. Well, maybe that happens with your article too, not you. But what you have to realize is that's what we're all excited to see. What are your conclusions? What'd you come up with? And something that I always recommend is as you're working through the process, even though, you don't want to be sort of a post hoc situation where you're writing the conclusions before you do the research, but you have ideas. Obviously, you think you know what you're going to come up with. And then along the way in the process is like, this is amazing. This is really important. Have a file, keep, bullet points, whatever it is for you to be able to reference that once you get into that home stretch and you're kind of worn out from the article, that you have that, and then it can kind of help you write itself. Make sure it passes the general reader test. Ask Dad to read it, ask your sibling to read it. And sure, they may not understand some of the technical aspects, but if they get what it is you're trying to say, then you're writing it in a way that the general reader can understand. And that's really important, again, because we work with industry folks and people in practical areas. So that's very important for us. Aim for the top. And with that, I will ask Professor Petrick to tell his aim for the top story about you and when Professor Crompton and the article, the Journal of Marketing.
Oh, yeah, I know which one you're talking about. My very first semester at Texas A&M, and I was very fortunate, John Crompton to work with my very first year. If you don't know John, look him up. Okay, read his stuff. It's unbelievable. It's an incredible career that he has had.
TTRA Lifetime Achievement Award winner.
TTRA Lifetime Achievement Award winner, you betcha. I got some Canadian in. That was awesome. But I had an article. It was one of the first articles I had written while I was there. It was a brand new data set. It was a strong data set. And I said, John, will you proofread this? And this was at 4:00 in the afternoon. I came to work the next morning at 8 a.m. and the manuscript was in my inbox. The entire thing was bloodied up. Every sentence was rewritten. Every sentence he took 3 or 4 words out of. He made it sound better. And I made the edits and I go, John, where should I submit this? And he goes, the Journal of Marketing. And I said, John, I don't think this is quality enough for the Journal of Marketing. He said, it absolutely is not. It won't be published there. He goes, but you don't have tenure for 5 years. He goes, you need to see what their reviews look like. And they have an editorial board of 5 members per article. I got 5 critiques of my research from 5 marketing leaders, all of which were probably 10 to 12 pages long. I had 60 pages of reviews to digest. All of these points made that article better. It's my most cited article. It went out to the Journal of Leisure Research. That's where it was the top journal at that time, whether you believe that or not. And it's the only article I've ever had that was accepted at first submission without an edit. It's because John edited and then I had all these reviews. So there's value in getting good critique. And I promise you that you're not going to get better reviews than you do from JTR. We just talked about, we have an editorial panel of 160 people. We've handpicked those. We've inherited most of those babies, but we're out there looking for people right now. And we're looking for the best of the best to add. And our upside is people don't say no to us, right? If as an associate editor, I ask someone, I can say no. As part of our board, you kind of have to say yes. So thank you to the panel for that.
Absolutely. Great story. Last couple items. Think about special issues and the benefits for you as an author. When you are a young researcher and there's a special issue in your area and you're listed right alongside some of the people that you view as mentors or heroes or giants in the field, that's a great exposure for you. It also is great in terms of citations because people find those special issues and think, here's a great way to build my lit review because I've got these issues. So these authors write together in one place. So take advantage of those. With that said, JTR, we don't do special issues. I never say never, but it would be a rare thing for us to do them because when you put on your editorial hat, what that means is we have to stop all those articles that are in process to make room for a special issue. And so we tend to just keep rolling, never say never, but that's kind of where we are. And then finally, respect the submission guidelines. It's pretty straightforward and, they're not straightforward. Nobody likes to wade through submission guidelines and dig through all the details, but they're very important for you to have a top-notch opportunity and chance to give that manuscript the best opportunity it can to be successful. So questions about these? Because this may be why a lot of you are here. Yes, sir.
Two quick rejoinders, but first of all, thank you both very much for the great sharing. I believe as a publishing faculty or maybe a reviewer for a journal or editor of a journal, I believe we all have very much similar feeling. I'm sure we can open this for a lot of discussion. On this page, I would like to comment on the second one, don't rush it, and the one A for the top. Don't rush it. I have a general feeling especially from the senior faculty who have published, they have a great idea, but they can't afford time, to get it done well and then submit. And some of the anxiety or whatever or feeling that they share with me is, if I don't get it submitted today or this month, this paper research will be published next month by somebody else, that type of thing. And so we can understand, how a good research should be organically and then, very well prepared for a journal before it gets accepted. So that's one kind of, I don't know whether this is a dilemma or paradox, whatever you want to call it. The second thing is for the top. I also have a general feeling as an editor or reviewer. I feel especially the younger faculty is having a career. They wish to try the top three first. They submit a paper to JTR, Annals, TM, and then get rejected. Okay, I go down to the second tier of the journal in my mind, get rejected, and then they go further down to to journals in the mid-range or end stream of the whole river, if I want to call it. And this can be sometimes can be very funny. I mean, it's very useful, practically useful for JTR to change to APA, because I remember myself even in the early years having to change for example, an annals paper.
Yeah, we've all done it.
This format into another format, and then you make a whole lot of change. I guess I myself don't have a very good view or advice or whatever opinion that we can share here for ideally, I would say the right paper goes to the right journal, and this will save all of us a lot of trouble, because now you have over 1,200 articles a year, submission a year, and then if ideally we can have a right article goes to the right journal, then those lower number submission journals will have maybe a reasonably more submission, and then the top ones will have the right number of submission. I don't know. I mean, again, this could be a dilemma.
Yeah, I can take a shot at a response to that. I understand. I mean, we all have colleagues that are junior faculty. We have PhD students, and I tend to think in metaphors or analogies. And for me, I think it's important to think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. there is time. I mean, we have time to do the things that we need to do. And you can choose, I mean, there are lots of different ways that lots of different people can have very successful careers. And I think you can opt to say, all right, well, I want to be a productive person, and, you know, maybe I've got a time crunch, so I'm going to strategize and look at a different journal. Or you can think, well, maybe I'm not going to have a million articles, but I've always said, and Joelle knows I've said this, once you've written it, it's out there forever. It's out there forever. And so thinking about a month or 6 months or even a year before you submit something may feel at the time, it may feel a little bit like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting time. But in the long view, again, the marathon, not the sprint, taking the time with that article and to really craft it in a way and to listen to reviewers, I think makes a huge difference. So I guess part of that is perspective on that one. I know you're
A couple real quick ones. We're getting run out of time. So thank you for the 3-minute warning. One related to the don't rush it. There's also a time to speed up. You know, don't let the better get in the way of the good. When you're rewordsmithing a paragraph for the 5th time, maybe the 2nd or 3rd time that was written better. So, you know, there's a time to submit. So John Crompton always says, don't let the better get in the way of the good, where you overthink and change too much. But Nancy's right, it should be a marathon. It's not a sprint to finish an article. And aim for the top. If you've got a secondary data source, you applied theory afterwards, you know that it's not a strong paper, you know it doesn't belong at the top. So I think that's what Hangun was trying to say, is it not every article, but your research should be aiming for the top. You should be trying to write quality research that can be doing all of those things. I think we've got one slide left. So Nancy knew I understood rejection much better than her, so I get to talk about this. The fact is that 90 out of every 100 articles that go to JTR get rejected. Every journal has its own rejection rate. There's a good chance you're going to get rejected, and rejected a lot during your career. First thing is read the reviews, digest them. Don't start writing on them right away. Think about them. You know, I firmly believe that the reviewers on our panel every day get there and say, how can we make this article better? And that's what every reviewer should be doing. How do we make this article better? And when you see 3 different opinions on how your article should be better, a lot of time it hurts. So sit back, digest what they said, understand they're trying to make it better, and learn how to evolve and make that manuscript better with that rewrite. So come back and determine plan B. If you're a doc student or a young scholar, talk to your advisor, talk to senior scholars, say, what do we do with this? Nancy, I got something to talk to you about. Last week, I had a proliferation of people that had reviews that,
2 minutes.
so I'll talk to you later about it. But people are asking me to help them write their second version of their article. That we don't have time to do that. And then if plan B is another journal, just don't just send it on. There's a good chance you've got the exact same reviewer the second time. Nancy and I have both reviewed the same article dozens of times. So make sure you make those changes. Okay. I think we're on to questions.
There you are. Yeah, we've come
It's
full circle with 30 seconds.
Yep.
So glad we opened it up for questions during.
Yes.
Other final questions that anyone has on any of those topics? Yes, sir.
Diane.
I was on the jury of one of JTR.
Yes, you were.
Just retired.
Yes, you did.
One thing I'm wondering is JTR does not publish research notes. Are you open to those?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we had a request for that not too
We said no.
long ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, we said no. I think at least, and we haven't talked about it in depth, but I think our perspective has been sort of leaning toward kind of in the other direction. Again, the marathon versus the sprint, to have those foundational articles that go with depth rather than perhaps going with the shorter research note. Sometimes the letter to the editor kind of serves as that,
Yep.
but it has to be, generally, it has to be connected perhaps to another article that was done. Often, a letter to the editor might be a discussion about an article that was published that comes from a different view, perhaps. So that you could potentially fill it in, but I really don't see us doing that in the near future, simply because we have so many manuscripts.
And they're great journals that have research notes as well. So, and we're trying to differentiate ourselves. So our foundational articles separate us, and the journals that have research notes, that separates them as well. And, we're each trying to find our own niche in that marketplace.
Yeah.
And
thank you again for your service.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
You mentioned theory is something that the paper is accepted or rejected. And then maybe synonymously, contribution to knowledge is very much the same as theory. And then language and grammar is something that made the paper rejected or accepted. Do you, because in the community, there's a perception that JTR, at least maybe not anymore, but in the past is more quantitative and methodologically driven type of journal. And will you consider methodological contribution as something very important to accept the paper? When a paper introducing methodology and implementing.
I guess the first thing I'll say is you hit the nail on the head in terms of saying it's in the past, because I would, and I did a little bit of research and dug in when we first came on as co-editors. And so it's something that Rick started and Jeff has pushed on, but I think old ideas kind of linger because you're not the first person to, to bring that up when we've done this. But in fact, if you go back and look, you'll see very much an increase in diversity of methods. We've also increased the diversity of our editorial board. So in that piece, and the other, I think a methodological contribution is absolutely important, but it has to have a theoretical foundation. It has to come from, in order to really be a methodological contribution, it's got to make that connection.
And the word we've missed here is practical application and contribution as well. So we're looking for three things at the back end. What is the methodological contribution? What is the theoretical contribution? What is the practical contribution? And we expect everything we publish to have all three. And we expect statements in there that make us know that happened. So that's why we're able to reject so many papers as well, because we're looking for all three.
Any other questions? I see you just threw the check.
Yeah, because on the checklist, our reviewers, when you review for us, you've got to tell us what you thought the methodological contribution was as well. Yeah.
I have a question on Zoom.
Okay.
Does the age of data matter? Is it okay to submit a paper with data collected a couple of years ago?
Yeah, and the problem with data from 2, 3, 4 years ago, that's part of why Jeff started the COVID statement, because what you collected before COVID is affected by COVID. What you collected during COVID was affected because of COVID. And if you collected it after, how might it have evolved and changed what we knew before? But older data is possible as long as it's still grounded well and as long as it's worthy data. So just make sure we talk about it historically, what might have changed it. Anything else?
I agree.
Last questions? Good news is we got 4 more days together. If you have any questions for Nancy and or I tend to like a good craft beer. Nancy and I both like bourbon, so we'll meet somewhere to make those discussions happen. Thanks to all of you for coming, especially on this early session. We've got a couple really good sessions coming up. Honggan, you want to sell yours real quick?
Oh, yeah, it's related, all research I relate. And I have some data to report about also on JTR, but from a slightly different angle.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
We'll have to be there for that.
Awesome. Last
Right.
words?
None, other than thank you all for coming. Yay, we're here together in person in 3D. Yay for that.